Russian Defense Ministry has issued 2 news bulletins since President Vladimir Putin ordered a special troop deployment, giving a detailed account of the progress of the operation and the situation in the Donbas republics. Canada announced the abrogation of the health emergency law implemented on February 14th. And Hurricane Emanti becomes the 4th to hit Madagascar in less than a month. Some 250,000 people have been affected. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated that the military operation in Donbas responds to the need to protect the civilian population of the region. The defense minister ordered to treat the non-resistant Ukrainian troops with respect. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu asserted that the operation in Donbas does not include attacks on Ukrainian cities and also does not threaten civilians. The Russian armed forces have launched precision strike against Ukrainian military infrastructure and reported that 74 ground military installations have been neutralized, including 11 military airfields as well as a naval base and 18 radar stations. President Putin reiterated in a message to the nation that the purpose of the operation is to protect civilians who have been subjected to abuses and genocide during the last 8 years. The People's Militia of Lugansk Republic published images of soldiers from the 57th Brigade of the Ukrainian army laying down their arms. The authorities of the People's Republic of Lugansk said these soldiers will be released and allowed to return to their homes once the hostilities end. Also, the Russian army says that Luhansk's and Donetsk's forces are advancing and have gained territory after the Kremlin launched a special operation to protect the region.
From the Donetsk People's Republic, advancing towards Bolnovashka, has advanced up to 3 kilometers, while a group of troops from the Luhansk People's Republic advancing towards the settlement of Shastia has forced the Seversky Donetsk back and advanced 1.5 kilometers. Now groups of DNR and LNR troops are fighting and inflicting fire on the enemy. Ukrainian armed forces units continue shelling peaceful towns in Donbas. There are casualties among civilians of the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic. The armed forces of the Russian Federation are not launching any missile, air or artillery strikes on Ukrainian towns. Ukrainian border guards have not resisted Russian units. Intelligence data shows that individual units and servicemen of the Ukrainian armed forces are leaving their position en masse, dropping their weapons.
On the other side of the conflict, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky broke off Kyiv's diplomatic relations with Moscow in response to Russia's special operation in the Donbas region. These actions mark the first rupture in ties since Russia and Ukraine became independent countries after the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991. Ukraine and Russia maintained ties throughout a complex history of relations that included 2 pro-Western revolutions in Kyiv in 2004 and 2014 that the Kremlin strongly opposed. Zelensky's decision came hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation in response to the breakaway republic's request. The Russian leader underscored that Moscow doesn't plan to occupy Ukrainian territories.
This morning, dear citizens, this morning has gone down in history. But this story is different, both for our country and for Russia. We have severed diplomatic relations with Russia. Ukraine is defending itself and will not give up its freedom, no matter what Moscow thinks. For Ukrainians' independence and the right to live on their land according to their will is of the highest value now.
The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, assured on Thursday that his troops are not taking part in Russia's special military operation in Donbas. The president of Belarus denied any involvement with Russia on this special military operation at the Ukrainian border. President Lukashenko also reiterated that Kyiv promoted the conflict against Russia, but doing nothing to avoid hostilities against thousands of pro-Russians in Donbass. On Thursday, President Vladimir Putin authorized a military space defense operation in Donbass and restated that invading Ukrainian cities was not a Russian objective. And we have more. North Atlantic Treaty Organization Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance is activating defense plans for its allies.
The Council decided to activate our defense plans at request of our top military commander, General Todd Walters. This is a prudent and defensive step to protect and shield allied nations during this crisis. And it will enable us to deploy capabilities and forces, including the NATO response force, to where they are needed.
And the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said at a Security Council meeting that bomb strikes on Ukraine are in violation of the principles of the UN Charter and that such actions will bring about a lot of suffering. So he pleaded for the hostilities to stop.
What is clear to me is that this war makes no sense. It violates the principles of the UN Charter and is already causing suffering, and it will bring a level of suffering to Europe not seen at least since the Balkan crisis.
Meanwhile, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily Nebezia, said at the emergency meeting of the Security Council held on Thursday that nobody listened to Russia's warnings about stopping provocations against Luhansk and Donetsk. Nebezia reaffirmed at the emergency meeting on the situation in Donbass that his country's warnings were repeatedly ignored. He also accused the West of sponsoring all provocations against Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics and causing that at the moment a military solution is on the way. While the session was in progress, Russian President Vladimir Putin declared the beginning of a special military operation to protect civilian lives in Lugansk and Donetsk and to defend the Russian territory, as established by the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter.
We have tried to explain to you the logic behind our decision to recognize the republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, insisting on the need to ensure peace and security in their territories. But you did not want to listen to us. You still do not want to listen to us. For you, Donbass is nothing more than a bargaining chip in a political game aimed at weakening Russia. But these are women and children, old men and women, who have been hiding for 8 years because they are afraid of being shelled by the Ukrainians. That is the difference between our approaches, and if you do not change your views, you will never understand this situation.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian ambassador to the organization, Sergei Skilsky, said that Moscow has declared war on his country and that all requests he had prepared to present to his Russian counterpart had no relevance and meaning.
I had the intention to ask the Russian ambassador to confirm for the record that Russian troops would not shoot at Ukrainians today, that they would not proceed with this offensive. My intent became obsolete 48 minutes ago, because 48 minutes ago the president declared war on Ukraine. So I would like to ask now the ambassador of the Russian Federation to say for the record that at this moment their troops are not shelling Ukrainian cities.
The European Union is planning the strongest and harshest package of sanctions ever considered at an emergency summit on Thursday as Russia launched a military operation in Ukraine and world leaders reacted with outrage at Moscow's actions. The EU will impose asset freezes and also travel bans on 23 people, 3 banks and notorious internet factory in St. Petersburg in response to the Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to recognize the self-proclaimed republics in Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states and also launching a military operation in Ukraine. The bloc is also expected to sanction 351 members of the Russian State Duma that voted for recognition of the 2 territories. The Russian government will also be further restricted in its ability to raise money on EU financial markets. EU officials are drawing up measures to restrict trade with Luhansk and Donetsk, mirroring earlier sanctions on Crimea in 2014. We continue on the matter. A market analyst in Frankfurt, Germany, on Thursday commented on rising gold prices and plummeting oil and gas prices after President Vladimir Putin launched military action in Ukraine. Robert Halver said that China's reaction to the latest events was being watched closely on the trading floors and that he thought that Putin will be the loser in the long term. Russia's actions prompted Washington and Europe to vow sanctions on Moscow that may roll the global economy. Stocks plunged and oil prices surged by more than $5 United States per barrel on Thursday. In the wake of the conflict over Ukraine, the stock index that represents 40 of the largest and most liquid German companies that trade on the Frankfurt Exchange has already fallen by more than 5% in the past 6 trading days. Gas prices in Europe are growing by 40% and are currently above $1,500. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The government of Canada has announced the abrogation of the health emergency law that was activated on 14 February in response to the protests carried out by transporters who rejected measures against COVID-19. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the decision after deeming the regulation no longer necessary. The decision comes in parallel with the end of the blockade by truckers of the Ambassador Bridge linking Canada and the United States and the eviction of protesters from the capital, Ottawa. The emergency health law sparked 2 weeks of protests by drivers that prevented the movement of more than $400 million worth of goods between the United States and Canada. Now we continue to other information because meanwhile, in Bolivia, United Nations will carry out alongside experts a follow-up of the ongoing process against former President Janine Áñez, according to a protocol signed by the state with the international organization. Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, tells us the details.
With the signing of this protocol between United Nations and Ministry of Justice, it is expected that the right-wing claims of alleged excess in trial of former President Janine Áñez will cease. For us, this protocol is a very important step and once again demonstrate the political will of the ministry and the ministry in transparency and commitment to international standards. This will allow us, as a United Nations entity, to carry out monitoring with complete transparency and impartiality. Protocol was signed by the Minister of Justice, representing Bolivian government, and United Nations Office for Human Rights, which will monitor all judicial proceedings, starting with one being conducted by state against former President Janine Áñez. And to extend that, we can carry out this monitoring mechanism for a measured transparency in process, and also promote respect for due process. Participation of the international organization is an additional guarantee according to the government. There are judicial processes that are very important for the development of our democracy, so that we have the possibility in the country to be sure that due process is being respected, the fundamental human rights, and mainly the possibility that all entities that have to do with watching over human rights can participate in them. United Nations monitoring will begin immediately. This protocol will apply to all those processes that are currently in Bolivian courts of justice. The most important thing in a process is impartiality and independence. Trial against Janine Áñez will be held on March 28 and will be virtual. She is accused of 15 violations of Constitution and law committed before she was proclaimed President of Bolivia after coup d'etat against Evo Morales in November 2019. There are 9 defendants, of which 2 former commanders of Air Force and Navy submitted to a short trial and were sentenced to 3 years in prison.
Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
Thank you, Freddy, for this report. And now we move on to other topics. In Colombia, 2 weeks before parliamentary elections, systematic violence rises in the interior territories. Kidnappings and selective assassinations of social leaders are causing alarm among specialized agencies. The political contest portrayed by the media prior to the March 13th elections differs from the level of violence that has left at least 30 social leaders killed in 2022. The murder of journalists and the forced displacement of peasants and natives like the Embera Nation add to the picture of violence throughout the country. These events are happening despite the early warnings issued by the Ombudsman's office, which documented the presence of armed groups and the risk of violence facing the upcoming elections. In Brazil, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said Workers' Party opposes privatization of state-owned companies and warned investors not buy Eletrobras. Brazil's government is seeking to end state control of Eletrobras, Latin America's largest electric company. Lula, in an interview, said that he believes the state should maintain a strong hand in certain strategic sectors. The government wants to privatize Eletrobras, but the move has been delayed. According to Valor Econômico, Judge Vital Dorrego of Brazil's Federal Counts Court identified a methodological error regarding power output of Eletrobras hydroelectric plants, which could increase company's value by several billion reals.
It's important for all of us to be concerned to sell Eletrobras at banana prices, as they want to do, is to get rid of the public patrimony to enrich even more the richest. The result of this will be more unemployment, or the result of this will be more salary reduction, or the result of this will be more intermittent work, and more workers doing irregular work because they will not have a secure employment as they have in a company such as Eletrobras.
Mexico's government sent an official release to the State Secretary of the U.S., Anthony Blinken, after referring to the recent murders of the La Nación journalist. The president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, described the U.S. position as an interventionist attitude about the situation. Likewise, he pointed out that condemns and follows up his government. In turn, it's justice that it isn't exists impunity. AMLO highlighted that the journalists' murder cases are under investigation of local authorities and feds also, and it has made teams to guarantee that it wouldn't be impunity. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Madagascar, Hurricane Emanti becomes the fourth to hit the country in less than a month, with winds of about 135 kilometers per hour. The weather authorities reported that the new event hit the district of Manakara-Atsimo. The governmental entity also announced a state of red alert for at least 6 regions in the southeast of the country. Although no deaths have been reported so far, the National Office for Risk Management estimates that the damage to houses, businesses, and other facilities is substantial. In this context, some 250,000 people have been affected by the tornado. And the Horn of Africa is suffering from a massive drought that threatens 13 million people with famine. Many human rights organizations have begun to raise their voices on the issue. In this huge region, its population lives mainly from livestock and agriculture. The last 3 rainy seasons have been marked by low records of rainfall, and to make things worse, a locust infestation devastated the crops in the area between 2019 and 2021. As this raises alarms, the World Food Programme urged the international donor community to raise $327 million to fund its regional drought response plan for the Horn of Africa, which seeks to address the most pressing needs of 4.5 million people over the next 6 months. A United Nations envoy on Thursday urged Sudanese forces to stop firing live ammunition and tear gas at anti-coup protesters in a crackdown that has killed more than 80 people. Adama Dieng has been in Sudan for the past few days, meeting with leaders, diplomats and civil society members in a bid to shed light on the crackdown. Demonstrations have continued in the Northeast African country since Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led a military takeover on October 25th, sparking international condemnation and suspension of aid. The coup derailed a fragile power-sharing agreement between the army and civilians negotiated after the 2019 ouster of Omar al-Bashir. The international organization expressed concerns about violations committed by Sudanese authorities and the use of live ammunition against protesters, and put the toll at 82 dead and 2,000 wounded.
My concern about the security forces' repeated use of excessive force and live ammunition against protesters since the 25th October 2021 coup, and noted that so far, at least 82 people have been killed as a result, more than 2,000 injured, and others, mostly women, subjected to acts of sexual violence. I called on the authorities to put to an end the use of excessive force against protesters, lift the state of emergency, release all protesters and activists still held in detention, and ensure prompt and impartial investigation into allegations of human rights violations.
In Jordan, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced on Tuesday the discovery of a new archaeological site for religious rituals in the country's southeastern desert. The landmark's existence dates back to roughly 9,000 years ago. According to the ministry, the historical site, called Desert Kites because of its resemblance to the shape of a kite when looked from above, is considered one of the earliest large-scale artificial structures known to date in the world. Archaeologists found a huge number of human figurines, animal sculptures, marine fossils, and man-made tools of the Neolithic era in the excavation site. Experts believe the new discovery proves that the people of 7000 BC had complex hunting strategies and trade mechanisms. A tourism development plan for this location will be discussed in the future.
Archaeological findings reflect historical identity and become the source of historical knowledge. The cultural value lies in enabling people and the society to better understand their past, match their present, and prepare for their future. The historic site in Jordan has great social, cultural, and economic value in the country and around the world.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.